Today, we're going to talk about why sports cards will not boom again, will not boom the way people think they will once again. And I want to talk through why that is a good thing because it highlights that the hobby's heading in the right direction. Now, for those of you that would have paid attention to a video I put out last week, it was around weird trends that were sort of happening within the sports card market, the way things were heading that gave me a bit of concern. And one of the things, I spoke about within that video was, when the hobby boomed, basically there's certain cards that people wanted, right? There were, rookie patch autos of key plays, the one of ones, the top tier cards, the top rookie cards of certain players. And because everybody wanted those, because they're the cards to chase for those specific players, people had to move further and further away from that one particular card. So it was like, well, I can't get the premier rookie patch auto, so I'll go to a different product. Or I can't get that year product because now everyone's done the same thing. So now I need to go to a second year product, a third year card, fourth year, so on and so forth. Meanwhile, there's so many, deviations away from where they wanted to be. And that was a sort of trend that I was concerned about with people sort of seeing card prices come down. They wanted to jump into something, but the thing they're jumping into is probably still 6 or 7 steps away from that one card that people actually want. And the concern was, okay, what does that mean for the hobby long term? And I think it goes into the topic for today, that same thought process, right? Around why the sports card, hobby, the market won't boom again. Because if you sort of look at what happened right during the boom, and this is not going to be rocket science, we've actually talked about this on the channel before, but you had people come in, they were chasing everything, chasing nostalgia, making a lot of mistakes, basically using government money. Even the crap cards were selling well. So you had all this money sort of float around within the hobby, but there are certain things that were basically being bought that should never have been bought. And that would be things like base rookie cards. And my general thought point around, why people are getting excited about the market growing strong in the future is, well, it's not going to happen the way that you think. Because when people get money again and the market gets stronger, people are not going to be buying the same mistakes they were buying, in 2020 and 2021, right? If somebody all of a sudden gets $1,000, they're not going to go ahead and buy a Luca, Prism base card like they were. And that needs to be kept front of mind when you're looking at the future of this hobby, because so many people sort of see that and rely on the fact that the whole market's going to uplift, but you actually need to look at, well, what helped the market grow so quickly? If you've got more educated buyers now, because a lot of people, like I said, came in and made mistakes, you've got these more educated buyers coming in, and they're not going to be buying the same things like they did in the past, right? The wrong stuff. Is that going to help elevate the hobby further? I think, probably not, because they're not going to be buying that kind of stuff. You're going to have less volume and therefore less volatility, which is a good thing. But what I think you will see happen is the cards that actually matter, right? The cards that actually have deeper meaning for collectors, cards that are tied to, rookie seasons or championship winning seasons or things like that, record breaking seasons, or tied to, a game used piece of jersey that's really important for that player's career, as an example. That kind of stuff, I think, will grow pretty well because the hobby will realize that that stuff is actually what people want. That's what I want to try and chase. And we're sort of, already seeing that, but you're not going to see the hobby boom like we did purely because people are not going to be making mistakes they bought, in the past, right? There's too many uneducated buyers in the past, and I think it's really good that many of these guys, have learned their lessons, right? Many people, I made mistakes too. I'm sure everyone did that's watching this video as well. Bought things and maybe overpaid on things that they probably shouldn't have. That's how you learn, right? You make mistakes, you learn. Unfortunately, some of these people have left the hobby because they got burned too damn hard. But the people that are still around are now more wise. They love collecting cards. They love having fun within the hobby, which is fantastic. So now when the money comes back in, they're not going to be like, well, I'm not going to buy this one thing anymore. So that's just what I want you guys to be keeping front of mind when it comes to this sort of stuff. Now, this is not meant to be me getting on a soapbox and talking about me knowing how the hobby works and all that kind of stuff. It's more like, well, this is a thought I've got in my head. This is what I'm seeing other people talk about online. I'm seeing some comments on forums and Facebook groups because I pay attention to a lot of that sort of stuff. And it just concerns me, number one, about people doing what I said to open the video, like we talked about in my last video, people moving away from the cards that actually matter and being so far gone that the things that they think are going to be worth money are not going to be worth anything. But then also people sort of banking on the fact that Prism-based rookies, as an example, will boom again, right? It's not going to happen again because there's nobody that's going to buy that stuff now knowing pop reports and all that kind of thing, right? That mistake is not going to get made again. And you're not just seeing it with, sports cards. That same kind of mistake happened when it came to video games, when it came to comic books, lesser extent to those two industries because, they were always booming, right? They went through their booms, probably a decade ago for both. But then you saw the same thing with luxury watches and all that kind of thing, right? You sort of had people just wanting to buy something and everything, but you're not going to have people do that again because they're going to be a bit more wise, you're going to be a bit more calculated with what it is they're buying, which means, what's going to happen? The stuff that actually matters is going to boom higher. Now, sure, you could get to the point where because there are so many people in the hobby and they all want the same thing and the same thing could happen, i.e. they all want the one card, so that means that gets elevated really high and they have to move further away from that card. But I think the general point is people are not going to move 20 steps away from that one card. They might only move 3 or 4. And I think that's where things will land. But again, I'm keen to hear what you guys have to say because this just could be a BS rant from me. Now, the other thing to keep in mind when we're talking about people moving away, it wasn't just people moving away from, the one card that everybody wants. It was also moving into other product and other sports that they didn't actually care about, which is why we sort of saw this weird trend and this weird bubble happen with things like soccer, F1, MetaZoo, certain TCG games and all that kind of stuff, where you got people, being like, well, I think this thing is underrated because all this other stuff is selling really well. I'm going to buy into it. And people forget that you need to buy the stuff that actually matters, right? You need to buy the stuff that people actually care about. You need to buy the stuff that has mattered for more than just a boom period. It's another thing I've talked about, and I'm going to go on a mini rant now, apologies, where you've got people looking for certain plays within certain sports, right? I talk about the cultural relevance all the time. The culture is everything for sports cards, for any card really, because you sort of have a boom and you look at your baseball, you look at, let's use football as the example, right? Quarterbacks and running backs and I think wide receivers are often the ones that have good prices. Someone can correct me if I'm wrong. But then what happened, because those boom, people were like, well, what other positions I think are underrated within the sport? So I'm going to try and chase that player in the hope that that booms as well. But that doesn't actually happen, right? Because in the grand scheme of things for that sport, are those other positions outside of, a select few players making that position very prominent and relevant for a short period of time, are they actually valued by people that watch the sport? Sure, they're valued. They're not valued like a quarterback is. They're not valued like a running back is or a wide receiver is, right? The same thing with soccer. You had people making plays for goalkeepers and defenders when in reality, it's attacking midfielders and strikers that should command the big bucks because they're the ones that are more exciting to watch. And yeah, you've got people going to games and watching this kind of stuff and getting excited about watching certain players, and they might have a favorite player who happens to be a defender. That stuff is often like outliers. So when you're looking at the grand scheme of things from a sport perspective, quarterbacks have always been super valued as a fan. When you look at soccer, strikers have always been super valued as a fan from a majority perspective. So when you're looking to try and make a play on cards, you need to be keeping that front of mind because you're not just changing, you need to basically change the culture of the sport in order to make the underappreciated card more appreciated down the line. And is that actually going to happen when some of these sports have been around for over 150 years? Probably not. So another mini rant there, but I'm keen, like I said, to hear what you guys have to say. I know I sort of went, all over the place with this one, but those are all the things that I think people need to keep front of mind about when the hobby comes to the whole boom and talks like that again. Because yes, I think the things will come back eventually, but it's going to be very targeted when it does. People are not going to make the same mistakes they did in the past. So mini rant, mini mumble on my part. I do apologize, but share your thoughts down below as always, and I'll see you in the next one. Cheers.